Speaking of your coverage on October 7th and the historical context here, you took some heat for that coverage.
Yeah.
Reflecting back on that, what do you think of that criticism, and what did you think at the time? How do you feel about that?
I thought our coverage that morning had remarkable context and information. One of the things I'm quite used to as part of my job is that I am often on air when something is breaking,
right,
or I get sent to something is breaking. In other words, we don't have a lot of information. We had that morning, we had a very small set of facts. So all you can do when you're on TV for 3 hours while the story is breaking, but you don't have confirmations and you don't have facts, is you can create context. That's what I've done in every other story all my life, and it is what I will continue to do in every story. I will always bring you context when we don't have any hard information. I was surprised at the number of people who actually posted things to say, this is not a time for context. There is no context here. Because in my reality, there's no issue in which context is not relevant or important. Doesn't matter how mad you are at somebody. Doesn't matter what you think of the situation. Doesn't matter what you think the outcome is. This is not a topic my audience studies from a day-to-day basis. So when it happens, we have to talk about it and we have to create the context. Again, same thing with Russia and Ukraine. I had to describe NATO, why it was formed, the Warsaw Pact, why it was formed, when they started, when they ended, what all the deals were, so that when you're discussing it, you have a proper context in which to frame it. That's what we were doing on the morning of October 7th. Now, some people were in WhatsApp groups where they were getting more information faster than we were. As a news organization, we can't put that on TV. If I get a WhatsApp that says something, it has to go through a process in which we can try and confirm it. So I wouldn't have done things differently because I didn't have better information to give. And I think it's something people have to understand, that they may think they've got better information on their phone. I don't have the ability to do that. If I had left, I was in Israel by the next morning. Had I been there the next day, the coverage would have looked very different because I would have had a lot more information. But all we knew at the time was that Hamas had broken through. They had launched lots and lots of rockets, which is interesting in and of itself because often Hamas launches rockets that don't make it over the Gaza border. So the idea that they had launched as many rockets as they had and they had penetrated the Iron Dome system. But we had to talk about who is Hamas? What's a Gaza? What are the conditions in Gaza? And I was doing it with one of the only other guys, we don't have a lot in our network who have spent time in Gaza, Aidan Mohidin. So we were creating context, and it came across to some people as a academic conversation, creating context around a breaking news situation in which we were avoiding facts. We just didn't have a lot of facts in those early hours.
Right, and I suppose you would say there's a difference between adding context to a story in the same way that people would give context to Israeli strikes in Gaza.
Correct.
And explain that the response to October 7th,
yeah,
and between providing context that excuses something like that.
Correct.
Right?
And there was no work that we did that excused, supported Hamas. It was simply explanations of it. But in explaining why Hamas came to be, you have to explain the frustrations of the Palestinian people. And in explaining that, you have to explain the failures of Israel and the Palestinians to come to a meaningful peace over and over again. It's not support, it's simply context. Context is not justification.
Right. Jonathan Greenblatt, he appeared on Morning Joe, I believe. He asked if the scripts at MSNBC were being written by Hamas.
Yeah.
What did you think of that?
It's what I told Jonathan Greenblatt. I've known him for a long time. We've been friends. I was deeply disappointed that he would say such a thing. He knows me, he knows my story personally, knows the context of my story, and he knows what I do. I think things like that are irresponsible. But he knows that. He knows I think so. He knows lots of people think so, and he's chosen to go down this road. He could be a very, very helpful voice in this conversation. The ADL has traditionally been a very helpful voice in understanding statistics and trends around racism and inequality in this country. I don't think that's what he and they are doing right now, but that's a matter that they can take up and hopefully will organize.
Did he apologize or explain himself in any way?
We had a good dialogue.
Okay.
I wouldn't characterize it as an apology. We spoke because we've had a long-standing relationship. We're probably due or overdue for a real conversation. That's going to take a while.
Okay.
But I'm willing to have it. I hope he is too. The problem is October 7th had the result of hardening hearts. And I live in a world where it's never going to get better. when you harden hearts. It may happen, but we're going to have to soften hearts again in order to come to a deal. The day there's a deal between Israel and Hamas, there are going to be a whole lot of people who think that everybody compromised too much and gave away too much. But that's the nature of deals and compromises. We are going to have people who sit around a table who are going to be able to validate people on the other side, whether or not they agree with them. They might even hate them. And that's just the world in which we have to operate. I'm not looking forward to a world in which Jonathan Greenblatt and I are not moving toward the same goals, which is global understanding between amongst different people, and this fight of anti-Semitism. I mean, it's a real thing. We all need to be together in fighting it. And this rise in Islamophobia or anti-Palestinian sentiment, all of these things are bad. And all of the victims of them are not people who deserve it. So I would just like to hopefully be part of a softening of hearts on this one.
Now, there was some reporting at the time that MSNBC had benched you, Ayman Mohyeldin, and Mehdi Hassan, who's now left the network. Was that true?
Well, I think some of the reporting maybe didn't understand some of the, particularly with me, my circumstances.
Because you went to Israel.
Right, I was there.
Right.
I was off my show the next morning because I was in transit.
Right.
We couldn't go to Tel Aviv. We had to go to Amman, and so we didn't get into Israel until what would have been Sunday afternoon U.S. time. So I couldn't have been on TV, but I was on TV reporting for the course of the week. I don't know what the other guys' schedules were, but we're typically on the weekend. So the point is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we're not typically on. So I don't know. I mean, I've read a lot of reporting about what was going on behind the scenes, and I still don't know what the truth was, but I was on TV a great deal during that week, probably 50 or 60 times before I got back the next weekend.